Hello, and welcome to another Modern Mind Ancient Book where we're going back to move forward. We're finding a love for the law, the prophets, and the writings. We're attempting to meet Jesus in his culture and learn to know him more so that we might love him more and walk in his ways. Did you know that the Bible has a story that everybody thinks is rough and hard when Israel is called and they're taken up to a mountain and there's fire and there's fear, but really it was about a marriage proposal? Today we have a special guest. His name is Dr. Doug Hamp. Thank you for coming on the show, Dr. Doug. We really appreciate that. It means a lot.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you. I actually have the book here in Kindle. I've really been enjoying it. You can get it on Kindle, on Amazon. Where else is it available, Dr. Doug? Maybe on your website?
You can get it on Spotify as a audiobook, Audible, and I think, they say wherever else books are sold, as far as I know. But yeah, mostly Amazon is probably the best place to get it. It is on my website as well, douglashamp.com. So as an ebook, though. So I'm not doing physical books anymore.
Fantastic. And Doctor, is it Doug Hamp on YouTube? Is that your channel?
Yeah, Dr. Douglas Hamp. Yeah,
Dr. Douglas Hamp. He's very active on YouTube. Wonderful teaching, scholar. You achieved a PhD. Is that true, sir? Yes, he's very capable and very worth listening to. So, all those places you can plug in and you can join the movement that he represents. You also are the leader of a congregation called The Way in Denver, Colorado. Is that true?
that's absolutely correct. Yeah, we meet every Saturday, every Shabbat, and we'd love for people to join us if they're in the Denver area.
Yeah, wonderful place, I'm sure. We're going to make it out there eventually for nothing more than a visit. But, without further ado, let's start talking about the subject of this. You wrote a book called God's Divorce, and it's the hidden love story. Is that right?
That's right.
And so, what a phenomenal book. I mean, the mission of Modern Mind Ancient Book has been to recover who Jesus is, because all of the meaning is found in what he understood, knew, and lived. Because that's what he represents. Jesus represents a form of Judaism. Is that a fair statement?
I mean, he was Jewish, of course. Yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
absolutely.
it's not super complicated, is it? And so,
It's not. Yeah, it's really not. And, God's divorce is helping us to reconnect with who God is. Unfortunately, we have been under this stupor for the last couple thousand years, thanks to a heretic named Marcion, who did a lot of damage to the faith of Christianity, suggesting that the Old Testament God was this demiurge and that he put the Jews under the auspices of the law and that Jesus came to free us from that law.
yeah.
And you've probably heard this sermon, that we are not under law, but we're under grace. No, fair. Paul did say that, but it's the way that it's presented in churches so often is, excuse me, it's very lopsided. It's definitely has a bias, and they present it as if the Old Testament law, bad, New Testament grace, good. Okay. That's the basic dichotomy that we are presented. And of course, who wants Old Testament law when it's oppressive and Jesus came to free us from that? Well, we're like, well, of course, I'm going to take the better deal. I'm going to take the upgrade, Who wants to go back to the previous model when I can get the upgrade? That is how this whole thing is presented. But
That's
I
right.
am contending that it's mistaken. I think we have missed it. I think we have been fed a false narrative roughly for the last 1800 years or so that the God of the Old Testament was, he was kind of corporate, right? Go see HR. You got to fill out your paperwork and you got to do all your reports and all this stuff. And let's make sure that we're up to snuff. And if you're not, then you're out of here. Very much rules and regulations, performance based. That's totally how God is presented. I have people, oh, we don't believe that. Yeah, you do. Because I've been to church my whole life and I've heard a lot of sermons. And I've heard that tenor of what is being said. I've heard between the lines of what is and what isn't being said specifically. Still, the message is the same. There's some years ago, I was part of Calvary Chapel, and I went up to a pastor after the sermon. He gave a great sermon about the new covenant, how it's so wonderful. And I went up to him afterward. I was trying to be very respectful. I said, Pastor, what was the old covenant? And he just looked at me dumbfounded.
Mm.
Like, well, I don't know. Because he told me all about the new covenant, how great it was. And I said, what was the old covenant? And he didn't know. And that is indicative of so many, not just pastors, but theologians, people who have spent much of their life studying the Bible, and they love the Bible. I want to be very clear. They love the Bible. They love God. They love the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And yet we have all generally been poisoned on this idea that when they got to Sinai, well, suddenly all bets were off. And, C.I. Scofield, he did a lot of damage to our faith as well. He suggested that when God took the Jews to Mount Sinai, he offered them grace, but they decided to go with law. My goodness. And they rashly accepted the law. Kind of like God's like, okay, which one do you want? Do you want grace or do you want law? They're like, we'll take law, and, and, and then they were in this predicament for some 1400 years till Jesus came along and, got them out of this bad spot. It's crazy. Yeah. God's divorce is to go back and to look at that covenant. It was a marriage covenant. I remember some years ago, I've been a pastor for a long time. And then I remember learning how the Jews have long thought that the Sinaitic covenant, the Mosaic covenant, whatever you want to call it, what happened at Mount Sinai was a marriage between God and Israel. I was like, wait, I just recently discovered this. And that was because I was plodding through the Bible and nobody in the church had ever taught me this. And suddenly I'm discovering that the Jews had figured this out a long time before we ever figured out as Christians. And I was kind of like, whoa, I was blown away because this isn't a new idea. They've known about it. Now, maybe they don't quite understand the divorce, right? That's a very important part. And understanding that, yes, there was a marriage, but there was also a divorce. That's where the story turns, right? Every story, any good story has, your basic setting, and then it has the moment of crisis. There's a big turn, and then there's a resolution. That's basically how stories work. And, there's three basic parts to any story: normal life, crisis, resolution. And this is no exception. This is the greatest story of all, right? God and Israel, happy, happy, happy. Crisis, they get divorced. Resolution, they get back together. But the question is, how in the world can they get back together? Because according to the Torah, according to God's law, if a man takes a wife and he finds some unclean thing in her and he gives her a certificate of divorce, sends her out of his house, she becomes another man's wife and they get divorced. He sends her away. She cannot go back to the first husband. It says that would be an abomination. It would greatly pollute the land. So now we have a problem. God did give a certificate of divorce to Israel. Jeremiah 3:8. For all their wayward ways, I gave backsliding Israel certificate of divorce. Well, there you go. A certificate of divorce. Hosea, tell her she is not my wife. I'm not her husband. She's
Well,
not
that means
my
we're the new Israel, right?
Well, new Israel, maybe. Obviously, all these terms get us in trouble because we don't
That's
always
right.
define our terms well. And what one person might mean by I'm Israel might mean that I'm replacing Israel and I don't care about the Jews anymore. Or what the dispensationalists mean by Israel is that, hey, I'm the church and the Israel, aka the Jews, are over there. But Paul calls us the commonwealth of Israel. He says that
That's right.
once Gentiles, you were alienated, separated from the commonwealth of Israel. You were separated from the covenants and the promises, but you're no longer strangers from the commonwealth. You're now fellow citizens.
It's that
with
whole
the saints and
grafted in
members of
thing,
the
right?
household of
We all
God.
become one nation, one people.
Yeah. And it's weird how, so I'll just I'll pick on myself. Okay. So I remember studying about the United Kingdom of Israel. Obviously you have King Saul, David, Solomon, and then it splits in two. I knew this historically, right? Of course I knew this. You don't have to read much in the Bible to see that, yeah, the kingdom split in two. Okay, great. But theologically, I had no concept how that affected my theology at all. I was just like, well, that's an interesting bit
It's
of
a story.
trivia or, history. It's important history.
Yeah.
And, it's unfortunate, but okay. But then Jesus came along and now he died on the cross and now I can be saved from my sins. That was the basic story that I knew. And
That's
it
where
took
most
me
people are.
years of studying to finally connect the dots and say, oh my gosh, the breakup of the kingdom was then prophesied that it would be undone, that
That's
these
right.
two sticks would come back together. But, as a dispensationalist, I thought that was all for the Jews. I didn't think that had any bearing on my relationship with God.
Yeah, there's
Had
a
nothing to
time
do
of the
with my
Jews coming
identity.
after the time of the Gentiles, right?
Say that again?
There's a time of the Jews coming after the time of the Gentiles, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, and so trying to put it all together was just really tough. Yeah, so I had no idea theologically why the house of Israel and the house of Judah were important to me. But I remember reading through the book of Ezekiel, and I was thinking, okay, so the Jews are in exile. Ezekiel is in Babylon, and he's talking about the house of Judah. That makes sense. But then he was also talking about the house of Israel. And I'm like, wait, what do you mean the house of Israel? In fact, there were people in Babylon that were from the house of Israel. They were inquiring of God through Ezekiel, and God said, I'm not going to be inquired of by them. You know why? Because they're not my people.
Mm,
These people that are the remnant from the house of Israel are no longer my people. I will not be inquired of by them. Thank you. Right. But then there's all these prophecies that God would put the house of Israel and the house of Judah back together. Ezekiel 37 talks about the two sticks. And again, it was one of these things where I read it and I'm like, well, that's interesting. I hope the Jews, hope it works out for the Jews. That's great. But for me, the church, Christian, had no bearing whatsoever.
mm,
So when I finally began to see that in Paul's writings, he was talking about you, the Gentiles, you're no longer Gentiles. You're part of the commonwealth of Israel. And then in Romans chapter 9, he talks about Gentiles and he quotes directly from Hosea. I'm like, wait a second. Why is Paul quoting from Hosea when Hosea was saying those who are not my people? He was addressing that to the
mm.
house of Israel. And Paul is applying that to Gentiles. What's up with that? And so it was, a bunch of these things that just kept compounding until finally I was able to put it all together. Right. And, this took me years. So writing
Yeah.
God's Divorce was kind of a 12 or 13 year project from start to finish to really understand our identity in the kingdom. And, I still love Jesus. I still know that I'm saved by grace. I don't think that I'm earning my salvation any more than I ever used to. But now I understand who I am in the bigger context of things. And for me, that really makes a big difference because I'm the kind of guy that wants the puzzle to fit. I don't want extra pieces sitting on the side. Like, well, I don't have to do with that piece. I used to have all these pieces on the side of my puzzle. Because, I had the basic framework and I had a face here and a tree over here and I could see the basic stuff, but I had all these extra pieces. I'm like, I don't know what to do with these pieces. And that's because I had definitely put some pieces in the wrong spots.
Yeah.
And I had
They
to go
didn't
back
fit.
and I had to remove those mistaken pieces and, put in the right ones. And now my whole puzzle goes together beautifully and I'm loving it. But what I'm discovering, of course, is that a lot of people in the church, most people in the church are very resistant to this idea because they think that I'm pushing replacement theology or that I'm some brand new kind of heretic.
Yeah.
And I get it. I get it. I would have thought myself the heretic 20 years ago. But but now knowing what I know and, seeing these passages, I have complete confidence that this is what the Bible is about. And it's about the Old Testament so-called that was established at Mount Sinai, with the help of Moses and all that stuff. That was God and Israel getting married.
That's right.
Why do you get married? Because you want to sign a contract? No. The so-called marriage license is an afterthought, right? Nobody does it because I want to get this marriage license.
It's a legal protection. That's all it is. The point of
That's,
getting
that's
married is to have a relationship.
yeah, exactly.
A
And
committed, consensual, mutually beneficial. I mean, we do it. We bring children into the world. We raise them together. God gave us all of these gifts. Everything he gave us was good. When Adam saw the woman, he said, bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. He smiled and he was very happy to find that which was his. And that was from God because it's from God's mind. He's is that. Everything that he created was good to see and to touch and to eat, except for one thing. And I really liked, this is kind of off the subject, but recently on your YouTube page, if you guys go to his YouTube page, you can actually become a member. And he's got some interesting members only things. And one of them was about God. Is he the author of evil? And I really enjoyed this. And we won't go on a tangent on this, but I'll say this. If you go to a buffet and there's a recommended and you don't want that, well, God's buffet has things that you shouldn't eat, but it's your choice because God is so good that he wants you to choose him. freely for yourself and have that relationship with him. And, your book, so for me, it hinged on me in theology. When I was doing my undergrad, I saw all those parts and pieces that didn't fit as we were going through the classes, especially when we hit some of the prophets. And I was sitting before, PhD recipients, and they couldn't answer questions that made a whole bunch of sense to me and I didn't have the answer for. And they just had these theological decisions that were clearly decidedly not biblical to me.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so, what I was looking at was a very long time, a revisionist history. I happen to really enjoy historiography. So I like putting stories together. And, for me, people are very interesting because you can have one position and another person can have another position, the subject be exactly the same. And so, when I saw, because I didn't grow up in the church. So when I saw these theological positions that were wildly varied from one another, explaining the same thing, I was like, whoa, whoa, there can be only one truth. What do I do with all these pieces? So I originally wrote a book of questions. I still have it. I haven't answered them all. I'm not you yet. And I don't even know if you could. I think it takes a team. But what's wonderful to me is that I read, really, Job, I think, is kind of the first book or whatever. But I read Genesis, and I saw this. I saw Lot and his daughters go into a cave and make a horrible mistake after living in a place that was so immoral that they became part of that culture. Even Lot offering his daughters to those horrible men, and the angels making everything correct. Like, they fixed it. So, they go out, they do this horrible thing. And then Ruth comes from Moab, the daughters of Lot, and his daughters. So this horrible incestual thing, it turns into Ruth and Boaz. And it's the time, for me, that's the one new man. It's the person who says, your people will be my people and your God will be my God. And so she comes and she falls in love with a man who's kind and law abiding. And when I see the Torah in Boaz's world, I don't see rocks and thorns and thistles and hardship and, this corporate structure, right? Fill out the paperwork. What I see is just a very kind man who takes care of the people around him and who was smitten by a woman who had great character. She was a hard worker. She decided to stay with Mara, who renamed herself Bitter. God was going to bring her back to Naomi. She was going to be sweet again. She was always wrong, but God was always good. So, like, I see this amazing story, and I'm like, there's no dispensational or replacement anything. The God of the Bible is the same God from the beginning. He created
Mhm.
man and woman in the garden, and he gave us all these wonderful things. We could have eaten from the tree of life forever. Like, that was our bag. We had it all. And yeah, there was a tree there that we shouldn't touch. But I mean, in my mind, I think God was just so wise. He was like, listen, it's there. I made it. Eventually, you're going to have it. You can't have it now, but just do what I'm telling you. I got a journey to take you on. I love you. And so they met every day. And then they decided that they wanted to be like him. Well, what CEO would let you sit at his desk? So here we are today, a fallen people that continue to do anything and everything that we want to do in the worst possible ways. The world is a tragedy.
I
And
think being
so,
like God is actually, I think that was the goal, honestly.
yeah, eventually, right?
Well, no, I
No,
think Adam and Eve already were like God. And I think that was just the sneakiness of Satan's deception is that,
being more wise, he turned what already was into something negative.
well, what does God say after they've eaten from the fruit? Look, now man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil. Now,
Mm,
lest he stretch out his hand and take from the tree. So God drove him out of the garden. But I think the tree of life, I mean, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was there specifically to force man to become like God.
mm,
Think about this. If so God is a free will agent, and
see.
so in order for us to be like him, not only in the way we look, the way we act, right? God can pre-program a lot of stuff, but what makes God truly, well, God is God. I mean, I can't certainly define him, but one of his main characteristics is the ability to choose freely. And I think the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was there to force us to make a choice. And we had two different choices. We could choose to eat or not to eat. And of course, we know the choice that Adam and Eve made. If they had chosen to not eat, I think God would have said, hey, look, man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil. The choice was the reason it was put there,
Oh,
not to eat it.
really?
but
Yeah,
to be forced to make a choice. Because
that's
once they were
interesting.
forced to make a choice, that is when they became like God, was choosing freely. There was a movie that came out years ago called AI. It was like 2001. I think Spielberg did it or something. It's way ahead of its time, right? And basically, this family is not able to have a child, so they buy a robot boy, and they get to kind of test him out. He's on factory settings for a little while. And after they decide they want to keep him, they have to initiate him or initialize him, whatever they say. And, they have to go through all these different things. But once they do that, he then, like, his mind opens up. And I think that's kind of how God put Adam and Eve in the garden, is that they were there, they were working, they were good,
Yeah,
but they
tending
had
the
not
garden.
yet self-actualized.
Hmm.
And the self-actualization is by making their own free will moral choice. And the
Mm.
only way to make a free will moral choice is to have a choice with real life and death consequences.
Wow.
And nobody made them eat from it. That was what they chose to do. But if they had told Satan, "You know what? Thanks anyway, but we're gonna pass," I think then they would have, in that sense, passed the test, and they would have had the same outcome of their eyes being opened without the corruption.
Mm.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a phenomenal take. I'm going to think about that for the next 10 years. So the reason that observation came to mind for me is because it seems like the more I get to know God, the more I try to walk in his ways and try to be more like Jesus. The thing that stands out to me is prayer and careful Bible reading. We're getting ready to release a thing on like exegesis and eisegesis and things like that, just to kind of orientate hopefully the listener to kind of see how your eyes, what you see, may not be what you really should see. And
Mm.
so, as I settle in this journey, for me, it's been about 20 years now. What I'm most interested in doing is just resting in God in the good and the bad times. So I've learned that cool of the day thing when he met them, what it
Yeah.
means to me is just communing with him, talking with him, waking up in the morning, just saying thank you for today, and on Friday night saying, "Hey, thank you for this week." This is a big deal, and I'm just thankful for my hands and my feet and my job and my house, my kids, and you did it all. It's all yours. It's not mine. And so, I feel like those moments are what God really wants from us, is just to be happy with what he's given us, because it's all good. It really is all good, even with the difficulties in this world. And so, I think that brokenness in the garden is what carries forward all the way to Abraham. So when you say there was a divorce, there's one moment that stands out to me, and it's the covenant of parts, right? The covenant of parts. So when Abraham and God make a covenant, there's these parts on either side and the birds and everything. And then Abraham keeps all the birds and everything off all day long. And then at nighttime, which to me goes right back to the Genesis creation moment, right? It's like this motif thing. God walks through those parts. It's God that goes through the covenant of parts. And so breaking the covenant would mean destruction for that one who walked through the parts. And that's what Jesus took. That's what it means, right? That he satisfies that covenant of parts when he was utterly ripped by the cat of nine tails and nailed to a cross and made a curse and all these things. He was the God man who married Israel, and he was the one who was destroyed for the broken covenant. But he took up his life and became new. And because the husband had died, now they could be remarried again. Is that what you intended with the book?
Yeah, exactly. That's the point, is that in order for a new marriage covenant to be established, that's the new covenant, the old one had to die, and that was done through the death of the husband that Paul's talking about in Romans chapter 7. And so when Jesus died, the old covenant died with him, and all of its obligations, debts, prerogatives, responsibilities died with him. And that is the handwriting that was against us, that was nailed to the cross. A lot of people say, oh, it's the 10 Commandments, but it's not the 10 Commandments. It's not God's instructions to us. It was the marriage or the divorce contract, the divorce certificate that was against us. That's what was keeping us
That's right.
from a relationship with God. And so now we are free to come into a covenant relationship with him. And let me just be clear. I do think that there were people that were not necessarily in covenant relationship, that were still walking according to God's ways. Paul makes that very clear in Romans chapter 2, that people who don't have the Torah, but they were doing what the Torah required, like God, they were good with God in a sense, but they could not be part of the covenant relationship. And I think in our Christian modality, we start thinking, oh, that means that they were going to hell. I just don't think that means that necessarily. I just think that however it translates, they were not able to be in a covenant relationship with God, and just leave it at that, and God will figure out the rest. But now through Christ, we who were afar off can come back in, and we can be part of this covenant relationship thanks to what Jesus did on the cross. So, we're still very much in need of the cross. We're still grateful for the cross. It's
Absolutely.
just understanding what its purpose was. And, there's so many implications when you start looking at this bigger picture, because instead of it being substitutionary atonement. So here's how I was raised. Basically, God the Father is this, by the book kind of guy. And,
Your
if
personal
someone offends
sins
him,
were nailed to
someone's
the
got to
cross.
pay.
Yeah.
Someone's got to pay. All right. Hey, someone's got to pay. So Jesus says, hey, Dad, I know you're really ticked off at these people, and you have all this righteous indignation, and I'll take it on me. Okay. Okay, good. And so, like, thankfully, Jesus took care of that, because Dad was really upset.
Mm.
And he was demanding justice. So Jesus comes along and says, I'll pay the price. And boy, aren't we just glad about that? So what we do is we're setting up God the Father as this really nasty policeman, judge, ogre kind of guy who
Well, that's what atheists attack right there, what you just
yeah.
talked about.
Yeah. And they're, because he's demanding justice. And then Jesus came and he satisfied God's justice. Man, thank
So,
you.
you know
Thank
what they
you.
say? They say your God is a child abuser because of that
Yeah.
idea. Yeah.
Yeah, but instead, it's that God and Israel get married. God says, okay, you want to go after those other gods? Fine. Here's your certificate of divorce. But now legally, there's a divorce contract. And so in order to take back the wife, it's not substitutionary atonement. It's the husband dying to cancel that old marriage contract.
It's a
And now a
totally
new
different
marriage contract.
view, isn't it? It's totally different.
And he went after this woman that kept cheating on him, that kept giving him the middle finger.
The
You know,
Hosea and Gomer thing. I mean, there's a prophet that shows us the image of this, and we just ignore it. We think it's a tragedy story. We don't understand what it means. This is the gap filled in. This is the puzzle that fits.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yep.
I'm absolutely enthused with this book. I'll probably read your book on and off for the next 10 years as well, just because I need the exposure. So one of the things that's super interesting to me, sir, about not only about your book, but just about what you've decided to do with yourself and your life. Like I don't remember what I was reading or what I was watching, because I've watched or read quite a bit of your stuff at this point. But I believe you were in Jerusalem going to the college there for your PhD. I forget the name of it. The Jerusalem, what is it called again?
Hebrew University
The
of
Hebrew
Jerusalem.
University, which is, I should memorize it because I desperately want to go there at some point. But you were talking with the gentleman, and you were talking about food, and then he challenged you about who defines food, and you landed on God defines food. And so you accepted the definition that God gave for food, and that changed your view. And that to me that was my Bible journey right from the start. I don't care about people that much. We're so confused about everything, and we're so hard, and we're so soft. I mean, we're exactly the opposite of what we should be at the wrong times and the right times. I mean, we're very confused, and we don't even know how to build lasting relationships. And so, when God saved me, all that I knew was that my father, who was dying on a bed, who should have never woke up because I said, Lord, I'll make an agreement with you. If you, I can't even barely talk about it. If you'll wake my dad up and you'll bring him into your kingdom, I will give my life to you. And it wasn't more complicated than that. That's what it was. And I was sitting next to him, and he was going to die very soon. And he just rolled over, and he's like, "Give me a cigarette. Turn on sci-fi. I want to get out of here." It's like, what? You're not going to make it out of here. You're not making it out of here. And soon after that, he told me he loved me. He told me he cared. He told me he was sorry. And my God had him confess the name of Jesus right in front of my eyes. I watched it happen. And there was nothing greater to me than that moment. So when he changed things in my life, I knew after my dad's funeral, we walked outside. I grew up super poor. We didn't have any money. He got cremated, and my sister gave me a hug. And at that point, I had been reading Matthew, and I looked up in the sky, and there was a rainbow. And it was like God poked me in the chest and was like, "Now you owe me. Remember what you said." And I was like, "Yes, sir." So from that point on, I knew not only my earthly father, I met him that day. It was short term. He went back into a coma and died a couple weeks later.
Mm,
But I knew my real dad and that he loved me, and I never knew that before then. But then I knew that my real dad, not
mhm,
only is he present, he loves me and that he wants to know me and walk with me and teach me. And so I quit everything. I went right to church and I had no idea what that pastor was talking about. I was reading the Bible and he was talking about something else and calling it the Bible. And I was like, okay, look, that's great. I met with the guy. I accused him of it. He was a wonderful man. He took it in stride. You know, all new Christians are pretty brutal, but I was particularly brutal. I went to Bible college. I sat under wonderful people. I started a master's program. I got to hang out with a guy like you, a guy named Dr. Kunjman, PhD. Wonderful man, absolutely wonderful man. And you know what I learned? I'll never be great enough to know everything because I just don't have the time in this life and I don't have the expertise. And you have to be skilled at certain things.
mhm.
You need a conglomerate. You need people. And you know what God said to me? He said, "You and that guy and that guy and that guy, you're my body." That's why I said, come together, be united, be one new man. And that's when I really started thinking, I'm like, oh my gosh, he's totally relational. He's not the God that we imagine in Exodus 19, which you write about in your book. If I can't adjure you enough, people listening to this, go get God's divorce in any way that you can and devour the thing and let it settle inside of you and let it bring to you the God of the Bible. Because what you're going to find is that Jesus is not your penal substitution. He satisfied a law. He satisfied a brokenness. Like any cult situation, there is nothing out there in this world, whatever you're involved in, it all has rules and law and ways of operating. And the Bible has those things.
Mhm.
There are rules in heaven. There are things that matter. God's kingdom is truly a kingdom. Jesus is the king of a nation of people. And Dr. Doug and you listening, you're ruled by that king under that kingdom. But it's up to you to love the word of God and do what it says. Like the faith of this man right here, who's greater than I'll probably ever be. I don't know if I'll ever achieve a PhD. To me, that is amazing. It's wonderful. I have nothing but respect for you for that, sir. That is a rigorous task, and you deserve all the honor for it. And I appreciate you.
Thank you.
But this much I do know, the greatness of God in living under his kingdom and the simple faith that a man with a PhD would say, well, God defines food, so I'll leave what God said. It's fair. I love God. I love his definitions. If
Amen.
we can be those people, then we can be settled on the rock. We can have a foundation that can bring all of us together to really truly become the one new man and be the salt of the earth and make a change in this world. And it starts with books like this, God's Divorce. This is how you really understand the text by its context, by its historical truth, what it means at the time of its writings. Dr. Hamp, we don't read Jewish literature. Is that a mistake?
Well, yeah, broadly speaking, sure. We got to define what you mean by Jewish literature, but certainly the New Testament is very Jewish, and so we should get rid of our
We don't
our
read the
bias.
accompanying Jewish literature.
It's yeah. We're okay with that Jewish literature, but then we are often very suspect of any other Jewish literature. And again, that's a very broad statement, but we can learn a lot from the Talmud. We can learn a lot from a Jewish understanding of the Old Testament. It's very, very helpful.
Yeah.
And doesn't mean we have to agree with them
No,
always.
no,
I don't agree with myself all the time, but
no.
we can certainly learn from other people and we can broaden our understanding and have more depth when it comes to, in this case, the New Testament. That's what we're going after and trying to understand our Messiah, who was very Jewish. All the disciples were Jewish, and yet somehow we've Christianized them. And so Yeah, I think that's definitely a problem.
Yeah. And for me, it's a most interesting problem because I don't understand why it's offensive. The man that, so let's go back to the first idea. The man who paid the price for my sin, which I don't think is the case. I think it satisfies the legal system in the Bible, just as you've explained. But if I believe that, why wouldn't I want to be exactly like him? Not slightly different, not slightly other. I would want to know what he does and do what he said to do. And we have it in like Matthew 5. He says, I tell you the truth, not jot or tittle passes away, not until heaven and earth pass away. I mean, there's even a condition associated with it. And so, here we are today. We've got 40,000 denominations. We can't agree on anything. We can't come together. We write papers that are contrary to one another. I can't tell you how many of them I've read. And when it comes down to it, the truth is we don't actually love the people in the other denominations because we think they're all going to hell. I mean, we've lost the fact that God married a people, as your book outlines, that within 3 weeks had totally decimated the agreement by making a god in the form of a bull. And so, no, it didn't matter to him. He was still like, I got a plan, guys. We're going to work this out. You know what? There's this one and that one and this one and that one. Those ones are still mine. And so it was all worth it for me, even to the point of Jesus emptying himself and becoming, right? Like the Ephesians 2 thing. We have a God who is so kind and so good. But instead of defining him by the garden, which everything was good and wonderful, we define him by the results of the fall and all the things that people did throughout it. We read the Bible and see the failures of people and say, your God is brutal. Well, we're the ones who are brutal. We're broken. And the only hope we have is seeing Jesus and being just like him. That's the only hope we have. Aside from that, nobody will ever come together because my opinions are more important than your opinions. And I don't want to live like that. I want to live by the Spirit, by hope, by unity. I want to live by every word that comes from the Bible. And I just, believe me, I've questioned and I still question all of that. I still have a million more questions. I hope to have a lifelong relationship with you because I got a lot more questions. But what I do have is I have a Jesus who satisfied a legal requirement. And I know a lot of people don't know what that means. And that's scary to me because we can never come together. We can never love one another if we don't truly understand what and who Jesus is. That being said, go buy this book, God's Divorce. You're going to love it. It's available on Amazon. It's available anywhere you want to find it. Just go ahead and take a look. Amazon's the easiest place to find it. Dr. Doug, you are the best, sir. I've been so thankful to spend a little bit of time with you over the past few weeks. I hope to have a lifelong relationship with you. You can learn from him. Dr. Douglas Hamp at YouTube. Anything you want to know, he's putting it out. This guy's putting out a massive amount of work on YouTube. You can see 3, 4, 5 things a day. He's got his own private thing. You just pay a little bit of scratch. I think it's like $2.99 or something. It is well worth it. Support this man. Support his work. We're going to continue to do the same. We love you. We're thankful for you. We pray that the Lord bless you and keep you and make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you and turn his face toward you and bring you peace. Dr. Hamp, thank you so much for joining us today. I love you as a brother in Christ, and I'm so thankful for you and your congregation and your work. And I will continue to be a champion for everything that you do because I believe the same Jesus you know. Bye-bye.
All right.